The priest. In Catholic theology, the priesthood is not just a job or a community role, it's a sacrament. That's a significant claim. A sacrament in Catholic teaching is an outward sign that confers divine grace. The seven sacraments include baptism, Eucharist, and ordination. And ordination is how a man becomes a priest. The theology behind this is called apostolic succession. Catholics believe that the authority Jesus gave to his apostles was passed down through an unbroken chain of ordinations from the apostles to today's bishops and priests. A bishop ordains a priest by laying hands on him, and that act connects the new priest to that chain going back 2,000 years. Without that succession, Catholic teaching holds you don't have a valid priesthood. What this means practically is that only an ordained priest can celebrate the Mass, the central Catholic ritual, in which the bread and wine are believed to become the actual body and blood of Christ. This isn't symbolic language in Catholic theology. It's called transubstantiation. The priest is the one who performs this transformation, and in Catholic belief, that's not something any community leader can do. It requires ordination. Priests also hear confession, another sacrament. Catholics believe that sins confessed to a priest and absolved by him are genuinely forgiven, not just acknowledged. They anoint the sick, they baptize, they officiate weddings. They're involved in virtually every significant religious moment in a Catholic's life, from birth to death. The training is extensive. A man studying for the priesthood typically completes at least 4 years of graduate-level seminary education after a college degree, covering philosophy, theology, scripture, and practical ministry. Many study for 6 to 8 years. Before being ordained, a seminarian is first ordained a deacon, a transitional stage that allows him to preach, assist at Mass, and perform some pastoral duties while preparing for full ordination. In the Latin rite of the Catholic Church, the Western Church that most people are familiar with, priests take a vow of celibacy. They don't marry. This is not a theological absolute. Eastern Catholic churches in communion with Rome do have married priests, but in the Western Church, celibacy has been mandatory since the 12th century and is tightly held. The priest is answerable to his bishop. He doesn't choose his parish, he's assigned. He can be moved, and he operates within a hierarchical structure that runs from parish priest to bishop to archbishop to cardinal to pope. That structure is one of the defining features of Catholicism. A priest who causes problems or fails in his duties can be removed from ministry, a process that became painfully public during the abuse crisis when the handling of that accountability was found to be deeply inadequate. One development that substantially changed Catholic parish life in recent decades is a persistent shortage of priests, particularly in Western Europe, the United States, and parts of Latin America. Seminaries that graduated large numbers of priests in the 1950s and 1960s have seen those numbers fall sharply, and the average age of active priests has risen year by year as a result. Dioceses have responded by consolidating parishes, merging communities that once had their own dedicated priests, larger units, served by a single priest who rotates between locations for Mass and sacraments. Some parishes are now led day to day by lay administrators or permanent deacons, with an ordained priest available for sacramental duties only. The internal debate over whether the celibacy requirement is contributing to the shortage and whether married men already ordained as permanent deacons could be considered for full ordination in communities with no other pastoral option has continued within the Church for decades without producing a resolution, and the circumstances that make it urgent are not improving. The Imam. In Islam, the concept of clergy is fundamentally different. There is no ordained priesthood in Islam. In Islamic theology, every Muslim stands in direct relationship with God. There is no intermediary required. A Muslim prays directly to God. No priest or ritual authority stands between them. The Imam, at its most basic, is simply the person who leads prayer. The Arabic root means to stand in front. In the 5 daily prayers that Muslims observe, someone has to stand at the front and lead the congregation. That person is the Imam. In a technical sense, any adult Muslim man can fill this role. There's no ordination, no special authority conferred. In practice, however, mosques have imams who serve full-time in that capacity. These men typically have extensive religious education. They've studied the Quran, often memorized it in full, and have studied the Hadith, Islamic jurisprudence, and Arabic deeply. Many have degrees from major Islamic universities in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, or elsewhere. What does a mosque imam actually do? He leads the 5 daily prayers. He delivers the Friday sermon called the khutbah, which is a significant responsibility. The Friday sermon is when the Muslim community gathers together and the imam's address shapes how people understand current events, ethical questions, and religious practice. He provides religious guidance, answers questions about Islamic law, counsels community members, and often serves as a mediator in dispute. One significant difference from the Catholic priesthood, the imam's authority is more advisory than sacramental. He doesn't perform actions that couldn't in principle be performed by a knowledgeable layperson. A Muslim marriage contract, for example, requires witnesses and agreement. An imam often officiates, but his presence isn't technically required for validity. A Muslim funeral can be led by any knowledgeable person. Imams also vary significantly by tradition. A Sunni imam and a Shia imam operate within different theological frameworks, with different views on authority and religious leadership. In Shia Islam particularly, the concept of religious leadership carries more theological weight. Ayatollahs are senior religious scholars whose legal rulings carry binding authority for their followers. The title Ayatollah itself means sign of God, which gives a sense of how differently Shia Islam thinks about religious authority compared to Sunni Islam. There is no equivalent of the Pope or a single global authority in Sunni Islam. Imams answer to their communities, to their boards, to the scholars of their tradition, but the decentralized nature of Sunni Islam means there's no single hierarchy. An imam in London and an imam in Jakarta operate largely independently, guided by shared scholarly tradition, but with no common governing body above them. One aspect of the imam's situation that tends to go under-examined is what happens when he's serving a community whose cultural experience differs substantially from his own background and training. Many mosques in Western Europe, Canada, and the United States have imams who were educated at religious institutions in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, or Turkey, places that shaped their understanding of Islamic practice in a particular social and cultural context. A congregation in Brussels or Chicago that includes second-generation Muslims who grew up in secular school systems, speak the local language as their primary tongue, and navigate between their religious identity and a broader secular culture on a daily basis, may have questions and pastoral needs that the imam's training didn't specifically prepare him for. Several organizations have responded to this gap by establishing seminaries and training programs in Western countries that aim to train imams within the cultural context they'll actually be working in, though these programs are still relatively young and the challenge is significant enough that it keeps generating discussion within Muslim communities across the West. The Rabbi. The word rabbi comes from the Hebrew word rav, meaning great one or teacher. That etymology tells you something important. The rabbi is fundamentally a teacher and scholar, not a priest. This is historically significant. Judaism had priests, the Kohanim, who served in the temple in Jerusalem and performed the sacrificial rituals described in the Torah. When the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in 70 AD, those rituals ended. The entire sacrificial system of ancient Israelite religion could no longer function. Judaism had to reorganize around something else, and what it organized around was study, prayer, and community. The rabbi became the central figure. A rabbi earns the title by being ordained, though Jewish ordination, called smicha, is different from Catholic ordination. It's an academic credential as much as a religious one. A rabbi has demonstrated mastery of Jewish law, Talmudic reasoning, and the ability to render legal decisions. Ordination is granted by established rabbis to students they've trained and examined, affirming that the student is qualified to answer questions of Jewish law and lead a community. There's no single rabbinic authority that covers all of Judaism. Orthodox, conservative, Reform, and Reconstructionist Judaism all ordain their own rabbis with varying requirements and theological frameworks. An Orthodox rabbi and a Reform rabbi might disagree on significant questions of Jewish law. Both carry the title. The question of whose ordination other rabbis recognize is itself a source of ongoing debate within the Jewish world. A question that cuts across all three traditions, though in different ways, is the role of women in religious leadership. Reform Judaism ordained its first female rabbi, Sally Priesand, in 1972, and Conservative Judaism followed in 1985. Orthodox Judaism has not ordained women as rabbis in any formal institutional sense, though some Orthodox institutions have created alternative titles, Maharat or Rabbah, for women with equivalent training. The debate within Orthodoxy over how far that can or should go remains active and sometimes contentious within those communities. In Islam, a female imam leading mixed-gender Friday prayer is controversial in most traditional settings, though it happens in some progressive Muslim communities, and scholars continue to debate what historical precedents actually demonstrate. In Catholicism, women cannot be ordained to the priesthood under current church teaching, and the Vatican has stated that question is effectively closed, though the conversation hasn't disappeared among theologians and laypeople. Women can serve as deacons in some capacities, and the question of restoring a formal female diaconate has been the subject of Vatican Commission theological study without producing a definitive answer, leaving the matter unresolved in practice. What does a rabbi do? In a synagogue context, the rabbi leads services, though notably the prayer service itself in Judaism doesn't require a rabbi. It requires a minyan, a quorum of 10 adult Jews. A rabbi delivers sermons, teaches classes, counsels community members, officiates life cycle events like bar and bat mitzvahs, weddings, and funerals, and renders decisions on questions of Jewish law, what is permitted, what is forbidden, how a tradition applies to a new situation. That last function, legal reasoning, is central to the role in a way that may not have parallels in other traditions. Jewish law, halakha, covers an enormous range of daily life. How food is prepared and eaten, how Shabbat is observed, how business is conducted, how family life is structured. The rabbi is expected to know this body of law deeply enough to guide the community through specific questions. A congregation member might ask, "Can I use this product on Passover? Is this business arrangement permitted? How do I handle this inheritance question?" The rabbi's job is to reason through these questions carefully and give guidance rooted in the tradition. Unlike the Catholic priest, rabbis in most traditions are not celibate. Most Orthodox and conservative rabbis are married, and having a stable family life is often seen as part of the role. The rabbi is a member of the community in a fuller sense, not set apart by a vow of celibacy, but embedded in ordinary life. This means the rabbi is expected to navigate the same demands as everyone else in the community, while also serving as its spiritual and legal guide.